background of this case was the defendant, Eric Nugent, had essentially been using alcohol and drugs to ply juvenile females for sex and to sexually engage them.
Okay.
This included several juvenile females. There were 9 people that he was perpetrated on, either sexually or through just providing them with different drugs, and these included methamphetamine, MDMA, or what's commonly referred to as Molly, LSD, marijuana. So there were several different drugs as well.
How long of a period did this go over?
So the initial charges began that we charged was from 2008 through 2016 when he was arrested. The majority of the charges and what he was ultimately found guilty for was charges that spanned throughout 2015 and into early 2016.
And how many young ladies were involved?
There were 9 adolescent girls involved in this case.
And what were their age ranges?
Their age ranges were between 12 and 17 years old.
All right. Now, when you went, did any of those individuals testify, or because of their youth and the possibility of keeping their identities a secret, did any of them testify, or did they provide written testimony?
In trial, we did have 6 of the 9 victims testify.
Okay. And forgive me for asking, but what was that like for them and for their parents?
In any case with this gravity and with these types of charges, it's always going to be difficult. I know that it wasn't easy for a number of them to come forth or to confront Nugent at trial, but they were very strong, and they did a great job.
All right. Tell me a little bit about your closing and what you told the jury once all the testimony was finished.
So when it came to close, the jury had the opportunity to hear from several witnesses. These included, again, the juvenile girls, as well as coworkers who he had made inappropriate statements to, friends, family, as well as professionals. So they had heard a significant amount of evidence, and my closing statement was essentially just a summation of everything that they had heard in trial. Essentially that the defendant had been using drugs and alcohol to trap these adolescent females and engage them sexually, going through each of the charges against the defendant and discussing how the state was able to prove that he did in fact commit those offenses. There had only been a suggestion by the defense that he had lived a rich fantasy life, and that the girls, perhaps while they were under the influence of these intoxicating substances, had hallucinated these events. Again, he had been plying them with drugs that mushrooms, LSD, that could be considered hallucinogens, and there was a suggestion that these events didn't occur and they just had believed they occurred. However, there was nothing substantive presented on their side, and ultimately the jury had a lot of direct testimony to work with.
Sure. How long did it take the jury to come back with their verdict? And specifically, what were the charges that were filed against him that he was tried upon?
So, ultimately, it took the jury just over 2 hours to come back. It was submitted to the jury right around 3:30 p.m., and it came back just around 5:30. The charges, we began with 17 charges, but 14 of those charges went to the jury. Those included 6 charges for criminal distribution of dangerous drugs to minors. It included 4 charges for sexual abuse of children. It included 2 charges of sexual intercourse without consent, and it included 2 charges of sexual assault.
Now, what are the possible penalties, or is it possible, will you ask the judge for a certain sentence, or is it up to the judge to make that determination?
So it's up to the judge to make the determination on what the defendant ultimate sentence is going to be. However, our office is able to make certain recommendations. There's a period of about 2 months before a case will actually proceed to sentencing, and in the interim, there will be what's called a psychosexual evaluation and a pre-sentence investigation that are conducted, and those serve to guide what an appropriate sentence might be. The judge will use those, and we will also use those in making our recommendation to the court on what we think would be an appropriate sentence in this case.
Sure. But in statute, each of those offenses carries a maximum penalty. So if he receives the maximum on all charges, what could happen?
So for the 6 charges of criminal distribution of dangerous drugs, each of those carry a 2-year to a life penalty because the individuals that he had distributed to were under 18 years of age at the time. The sexual intercourse without consent, those 2 charges are between 4 and 100-year penalties. The sexual assault charges are the same, up to a 100-year penalty. And the sexual abuse of children, one of those had a 100-year penalty, and 3 of those had 10-year penalties. So those can run consecutively. So essentially, he could have 6 life sentences and 500 years from the 100-year penalties with an additional 30 years. So 530 years plus 6 additional life penalties.